Hi viewers, today it's a great honor for me. Today's honorable guest, she's a writer, author, journalist, and she's a PhD scholar. So one and only Yvonne Ridley. Yvonne, welcome in Guest with Nazir.
Thank you very much.
Please tell our viewers, Yvonne, your early days and your childhood.
Yes, well, I was raised in a working class environment in a village in County Durham, where we were surrounded by coal fields, pit villages, shipbuilding and steel making. And it was very much an industrial landscape. And it was very much a misogynistic environment for a girl to be raised. I was one of three girls, and it was quite tough because expectations weren't high. You were just expected to find a good husband and hitch onto him, and that was it. I went to the grammar school, and again, the teachers were very much influenced by your background. If you came from a working class background, they didn't seem too interested in your career development. And in fact, our careers advisor was extremely negative. I remember at 14 being interviewed, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be a journalist, sir." And he said, "Okay." And that was the sum total of the careers advice. The following year, I went back, and he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a journalist, sir." And he said, "But you said that last year." And I said, "Yes, sir, because I want to be a journalist." And he ordered me out for being cheeky. I had no encouragement. There were other friends of mine who I've kept in touch with who had similar negative responses to their hopes and ambitions. So to all of your students that are listening today, I would say, if anyone tries to undermine your ambition or tries to destabilize your goals in life, ignore them. It's down to you. And, if you have big ambitions, then good for you. And don't let anyone deter you from aiming very high. Because the one thing that I have found is if you're determined to do something, you will succeed. And thankfully, I ignored my careers master and did not allow him to derail my plans from journalism. I was wholly focused and determined that I would do it, and alhamdulillah, that's what happened. So I entered into a profession, and again, I wanted to be an investigative journalist, and I was told, leave that to the guys, go into features, go into the women's pages. But I didn't. And so, don't let anybody railroad you into something that you feel uncomfortable about doing. In your heart of hearts what you're capable of and how determined you can be. So, that's my message to the students out there.
At that age level, obviously, you are thinking that this person, this player, this journalist, this lawyer is my ideal. So at that stage, do you remember that who was your ideal personality to follow?
Yes, it was Robert Fisk. And I was reading his words from a massacre that had happened in Palestine. Well, it happened to Palestinians. It happened in Lebanon, and it was Sabra and Shatila massacres. And his words made me cry. And I just thought, if you can move people in that way, you know, the pen is mightier than the sword. And so Robert Fisk, the late Robert Fisk, was one of the big influences in my life.
You have worked with a lot of producers and the production teams, especially in the productions. So who you have idealized that this production team was the best team I have worked with?
Well, in terms of documentaries, I would say a guy called Majid Kabazan. And he was so fastidious and such attention to detail. And he'd be a real pain. Well, I'm speaking in the past tense, he's still very much alive. And you know, it was excruciating working for him and with him because he was so demanding in the detail of things. But probably one of the best teachers that I've had in terms of making documentaries. And it was the attention to detail that really taught me that, you know, the whole picture, even the smallest part, is important.
Today, Yvonne, we are in a very important phase of history, because if we will see the Afghanistan invasion, and today it's almost 20 years has been completed. America has taken its army back, and allies are also taking their people or their infrastructure or whatever they can take out of it. And how you see, especially your story at that time, and today we have a complete generation gap. So please share your experience with our viewers.
Well, if I've learned anything from the last 20 years, it's the power and the danger of propaganda and fake news. And the war in Afghanistan started with all of that, because when a country goes to war, it can't drop bombs on nice people, so it has to demonize them first. And the Taliban were demonized beyond recognition. And the demonization was so powerful that it is still very difficult to unpick today. The lies that were told about the Taliban included that they didn't educate girls, that they closed down girls' schools. This was certainly not true. I happen to know that the Taliban actually came to Britain and examined the curriculum in some Islamic schools to take back ideas for their own schools in Afghanistan, because they had inherited schools from a Russian occupation, and the only textbooks available were communist-based books, which obviously weren't ideal. So this was the demonization process. When the war started, we saw images in Kabul of women burning their burqas, the blue chador, and men shaving off their beards. And the reality is many of them were paid by Western journalists to do that, so that they could have a good headline or have a great image. You know, the Taliban has gone, women are burning their burqas, men are shaving off their beards. And of course, it was all manufactured news that imagine somebody coming into your country and saying, I'll give you $50, which was like a month's wages.
Sorry for interruption. Why it took 20 years to coming on the tables for both parties, whether it is the invasion forces or the Taliban. So it took 20 years. So I am talking about a complete generation. So it means the full generation of Afghan people have suffered all these horrors of war. And especially I will say that women, children, girls, their deprivation, especially education, and we name it. It's a very long list.
Yes, well, it's and it hasn't been just 20 years. There's the Russian occupation, there's the civil war, there was the Taliban the first time round, who were quite tough and uncompromising. I think the Taliban of today is going to be hopefully softer and more mature. But even today, we entered this new era with lies. I watched in horror as a famous journalist on in a global satellite TV station looked in the camera. She had Taliban soldiers behind her. They were shouting, Takbir, Allahu Akbar, victorious soldiers. And she said, the Taliban behind me are saying death to America. And I thought, they weren't saying that at all. But that was her message to the American people, that's what they were saying. So, fake news is still around. We had images of 3 women in black abayas walking down the street, being led in chains on their feet by a man. And it was, welcome to Kabul, the Taliban is back. This picture was originally shot in Iraq by a Reuters photographer, and someone had taken that, said, oh, this is Kabul today, and they had photoshopped chains on the feet of the women. Now then, that was retweeted thousands, tens of thousands of times across the social networks. And this is how fake news happens. And then before you know it, it becomes fact. And then 20 years down the line, somebody will say, oh, yes, I remember when the Taliban came into Kabul and women had chains on their feet. And that's how the lies start. So,
and what our viewers will be interested, especially because September is coming and we are going to enter in September, especially your experience, your captivity in the hands of Taliban in a shorter version. So please share your story, because I think my viewers, it will be experience for them. And I would like to request you to please share your memories.
Well, I was working as chief reporter for the Sunday Express. I went on an undercover mission to do a feature on life inside Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. And 2 days into it, I was rumbled, arrested, and I really thought, I'm never going to survive this, because the propaganda which had come from the White House and Downing Street told me that this was the most evil, brutal regime in the world, and they hated women. So I didn't think I would survive the first night. I survived for 11 days. I had adopted a risky strategy of being the prisoner from hell, and I spat at them, I swore at them, I refused to answer questions, I even threw things at them. And their response to me was, why are you behaving like this? You are our guest. We want you to be happy. And I'm thinking, why are you behaving like this? You're supposed to be brutal and evil. What don't you understand about your job description? So there was no meeting of minds at all. There was a complete clash of culture. And I was terrified the whole time. It was only on the point of releasing me on humanitarian grounds, as I walked across no man's land back into Pakistan, that somebody shouted, "How did the Taliban treat you?" And I thought about it in those few seconds as I was going to freedom. And I thought, gosh, they treated me well. They treated me with kindness, with respect, with courtesy. So when I got over to the other side, I told the truth. And there was outrage. I was sort of bundled off and carted away. And, the war had started by this time. So it was, let's focus on the war. We don't want to hear anything nice about these Taliban guys. And others said, oh, she's suffering from Stockholm syndrome, which is where you bond with your captors. Well, the Taliban and I certainly did not bond. They couldn't wait to see the back of me. And in fact, Mullah Abdul Salim Zaif, the Taliban ambassador in Islamabad, made a press conference. And he said, we are releasing the English woman on humanitarian grounds. She's a very bad woman with a very bad mouth. My mother was furious. Not with them, but with me. She said, I didn't raise you to swear. And so she was annoyed. But, this is, people couldn't understand why I was coming back, telling them something quite different to George Bush and Tony Blair. But it goes back to this demonization, the drums of war, and let's really make these people seem like devils. So when we do unleash the bombs, there'll be no tears. It's shocking, but this is what happens ahead of war. So to all the budding journalists out there, try not to be used.
So when you were leaving Afghanistan, so have you ever thought that you will keep your promise and you'll study Quran and the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him?
Well, I did give that undertaking. I mean, they invited me to embrace Islam then and there as a prisoner, and I said I couldn't do it while I was still in prison, but I said, let me go and I will read up about Islam. And in truth, as a journalist, I realized very quickly as a prisoner that Islam wasn't something that the Taliban picked up and put down after Friday prayers. It was their life system. Everything that they did was through the lens of Islam. And I, just watching and observing them, I realized that I couldn't write with any authority about the Muslim world unless I knew something about this faith, which was obviously a way of life for many people. So I gave them an undertaking, let me go and I promise I'll read your Quran. And I did that when I left prison. And it started off as an academic exercise, the fulfillment of a promise, but it very soon turned into a spiritual journey for me. And it was very easy for me. I had a core belief in God. I was a practicing Christian. And I thought, springboard, Christianity is a great springboard to Islam. And after 2 years of studying it, I ended up embracing it. Nobody was more surprised than the Taliban. Of course, they said, oh, that's because of us that she's converted. But it was many Muslims, many influencers, and predominantly the teachings of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that brought me to Islam.
Yvonne, because you've been given many awards and you've been given the one of the, I will say, the highest award, that very influential Muslim woman. So, what is your message for the international capitals who are now interacting in interaction with Taliban government? That how, as a society, because world is a global village, we all can help. How the life of a child who is suffering, who has a lot of deprivation, whether it's a clean drinking water, health facilities, education, so on. So how we can help Afghanistan society and what we can do for them?
Well, I think we're going to have to wait until the Taliban government is formed, but they need to rebuild their country. And one of the things that they will need are qualified teachers, because they've got the schools. The schools were built by the West, but the truth is there were no teachers to put in the schools. This is why the adult literacy rates are still appallingly low in Afghanistan. Nearly 4 million children have yet to go to school to experience what school is like. Because of the instability in the country, about 10 million in the last 2 years haven't had full-time lessons. So I'm quite sure that the Taliban will want teachers. I'm quite sure that they'll want all sorts of experts. You know, I think that they were heartbroken to see such a brain drain when they arrived in Kabul and people flooded to the airport. And of course, Britain, America, and other NATO countries were taking these people to their countries. They were taking the cream, the educated, and very happy to do so. That wasn't a humanitarian effort. That was self-interest driven to have these people add to their country.
Sorry for interruption, it is two-way traffic, because if the people who are leaving their motherland, it is their own decision. So nobody's forcing them. So it is, I think it's a decision of the choice. They have been given a choice.
It's true, but I've also spoken to some Afghans, men and women, who are watching with interest because they're thinking, you know what, I want to go back and I want to help rebuild my country. Everything rests on the Taliban, and their behavior over the next few months will be crucial. They've said some amazing things in that extraordinary press conference they gave right at the beginning, that they were talking of peace, of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of amnesty, of women's rights, human rights. And people were looking and listening and thinking, wow, you know, this isn't what we've heard about the Taliban. They must be lying. Well, the proof will be in the pudding. It will be in actions and deeds. And what I would say to the Taliban is, you've said some very fine words. Now let's see you back them up with some very fine actions. Because, you know, as Muslims, we are all going to be judged by the behavior of the Taliban over the coming months. And if they turn out to be lying, people will never forgive them for raising hopes, raising expectations, and then not fulfilling them. But the international community has to play its part. The Taliban cannot have a flourishing, economically viable country without the support of the West. Now, the West has bombed the country. That didn't work. The West has thrown in all sorts of money, and the only people who benefited and got rich off the back of Afghanistan were the Western contractors and private security firms and a few privileged elite few in the major cities, and some warlords profited on the back. So the West needs to continue giving aid. They don't need to give weapons or guns. They've done that already. You know, the Taliban has its own air force now, thanks to America. So bombard them with humanitarian aid, with practical help, not with sanctions, and unfreeze all the assets and the cash, and, you know, give them a chance to let Afghanistan become a success story.
So how UK can help? Because if I'll see the history, because if we'll see after Second World War, UK has struggled. And I remember when I was reading the history that a lot of people came from other countries who built the industry, who built the factories. So in today's age, I think you're right, Afghanistan need more people who can give them technical help. As you mentioned, financial difficulties they're facing because a lot of international institution has to stand with them, not sake for the Afghanistan, for the sake of the people who are suffering, for the sake of the humanity.
Yes, well, I think that we can all help, but, you know, the Taliban might not want outsiders coming in. We've got to consider that as well. So, you know, over the next few weeks and months, we'll see exactly what they want. I'm quite sure that they will make appeals to the international community. And if it's teachers, if it's doctors, I don't think they will struggle. I think they'll be inundated with people who want to turn Afghanistan into a success story.
Yvonne, because of time restraints, so what are your new projects? So what is happening? Are you are doing new book or any new project or a documentary, just for viewers' interest?
Well, I'm watching Afghanistan closely. I have been in the country many times before, and I expect that I'll be going back again. Hopefully this time to report a success story.
So when we say
hopefully I'll get a visa this time.
So the success, when we say success story, so what it meant for my understanding, and especially for the viewers' understanding, please.
By a success story, I mean a country that offers peace, offers stability. Let's see those women's rights in practice. Let's see women taking a productive part in the landscape of their country. Let's see women in this government that, you know, they're saying will be diverse and will reflect all ethnic minorities. Let's see the Hazara having a voice for once, and let's see an end to sectarian and violence, and hopefully let's see an end to this ISIL Khorasan, which caused such a devastation in Kabul airport with the deaths of all of those innocent Afghans.
And at the end, again, I'm grateful for your precious time. And what is your message for our viewers, especially people watching in Afghanistan?
Well, it's a part of a quote inspired by Nelson Mandela, and it goes something like this: "It's only impossible until it happens."
A beautiful message. Thank you very much for joining me. It is a great honor. And I hope when you will come back from Afghanistan, we'll discuss your experience and your observations. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much. Salam alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Viewers, it was a great honor for me to have one of the famous journalists, renowned journalist, Yvonne She has done a lot of work, and I hope in coming days she will do a lot of work for the journalism students. Thank you very much. Keep watching Sheffield Live TV.